Egg shake. I like them. Raw egg shake. I know, it sounds disgusting. I'll link to a video on it. It's pretty good. You might want to try it. I mean, look at some of the comments. People are like, yo, it's surprisingly good. Anyway, shutting down the federal government is in the news this morning. It's like, we're going to reach the debt ceiling, the debt limit. Now, they've raised this debt limit, like, I don't know how many times. I mean, Reagan raised it 13 times alone when he was in office. So, like, they have this, like, debt ceiling limit. And, like, anytime they need to go above it, they're just like, we're raising the debt ceiling. So the debt ceiling, it means nothing, right? At the same time that they're threatening to close down the federal government, which would be an amazing thing, right? Like, couldn't they shut it down and just, like, not reopen it? Like, what would really be the cause and effect of, like, shutting down the federal government for, like, average Americans? Like, it would be fabulous. Like, you'd have a couple national parks that are closed, but, like, why don't you just have the states run them? You know, so it's like, we don't really need a federal level. And what about the military and stuff? Like what? So we can go kill millions of Afghans or like Iraqis, or like what? I mean, what do we really do? We need to protect ourselves, our interests foreign and abroad. Like, no, that's just like some propaganda that you've been fed your entire life. And it's just not really necessary. Like, if you look at the entire federal level, we don't need it. Like, there's just no point. Like, we should be 50 nations. Like, we should be 50 nations, possibly united. And in sort of any type of real crisis, maybe like you wouldn't, like, nobody's gonna invade 50 like it's like a fine. You don't need the federal level. Nonetheless, if they don't figure out how to raise the debt ceiling by October, then the federal level will be closed down, whatever that means. They've done it a bunch of times. However, at the same time, they're trying to push a $3.5 trillion stimulus bill. So they're gonna run out of money, like, literally within, like, the next 7 days. Or maybe the end of October, maybe, I don't know, because the government runs, like, really thin margins. Not like a household where you should be running with, like, maybe 6 months margin. Maybe you get up to a year. Maybe times are crazy, so you're like, no, we want to have a little bit extra savings and a little bit less expenses. You know, and the less expenses you have and the more savings you have, the longer runway you have. The federal government's like, no, we run, like, 45 days out, man. We run it on the edge. But they're going to run out of money in the next 45 days, or less than that. But they're also going to spend potentially $3.5 trillion. What? That is interesting. Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But they will, and if they don't do that, the entire financial system will basically collapse. So they will print the money. Like, they will print it. They have to. Like, it's not an option at this point in time. They can't raise the interest rates. Understand that that's a fake. That's a head fake. You cannot raise the interest rates. There's inflation until there's not. So inflation will just continue to happen. And if they don't recapitalize the system, add more capital, like, we're at that spot where, like, if you don't do, I would say, at least 10 trillion a year in, like, federal spending, everything falls apart. Like, that's how down the rabbit hole we are. So people are like, oh, our national debt at like 30 trillion is pretty high. Off balance sheet, it's actually over 180 trillion additional by 2030. So, like, by 2030, if the US government at the federal level is still a thing, which is, I think, debatable. I think that the nation is literally looking at shattering into pieces, which I think would be an immensely positive thing. I know when you hear that originally, you're like, oh, whoa, that's very un-American. I feel not patriotic to that. Like, look at the entire, like, deal with nation states and be like, do we really need that? Like, do we really need nation states at this point in time? Like, it's 2021. Like even like voting. Like, can we not just, like, have a blockchain voting system so we don't even have to debate, like, what the results are, and we have, like, lifetime results, like, immediately? But at the same time, why would we have a political class that literally taxes you, inflates your currency, and then redistributes it to other people? Like, why do we need that at all? Like, we don't need that. Like, it's pointless. It's completely pointless. And I would urge you to think through that argument, or think through that idea, and be like, do we really need a federal level? Like, what would be the real consequences of shutting down the US government and never really opening it again? Like, basically nothing. Like, if you want to have a military, like, just use them for, like, what their original purpose is, like domestic protection. Like, we don't need 60 military bases around the planet. Bring them home. Protect our borders here. Maybe every state will just pay, like, a $1,000 a year tax per citizen to fund the military. It's more than enough capital. There's nothing else we need at the federal level. Everything can be done at the state level. Interesting thought experiment. It's not going to happen. But at some point in time, when they literally crash the dollar into the side of a mountain, and they push their passports and all that other little things, you know, take more and more of your liberties, I think that the states are going to get restless and probably start grouping up and going like, yeah, do we really need to be part of the union? And then I would argue at that point, do we really need to be part of states? Who's going to build the roads? I mean, the best roads I ride on are private. I like paying tolls. I like nice paved roads. But, I mean, if you don't have a federal level, that opens up a lot of airports. That opens up a lot. Like, you could basically do a lot of stuff if you got rid of this parasitic political elite class. It's just my 2 cents. But anyway, if they don't figure out a way to raise the debt ceiling, which they will, they'll default on the national debt and shut down the federal government. But at the same time, they're going to spend an additional $3.5 trillion or so on a new stimulus plan that is going to take more and more of your freedoms. Welcome to America, slaves. Peace.